And through your confidence in that Islam and in that Iman, you will eventually exude this nur, which is, no pun intended, which is going to uplift other people around you. And thus that representation is not going to come from the people that are oppressing you, but it's going to come from Allah, right? And then it's going to be coming through you as well, as long as Allah Azza wa Jalla is with you. Welcome to the 22nd episode of the 4th podcast. My name is Ali Wazir.
My name is Ibrahim Ali.
And my name is Talha Muhammad.
And today we want to discuss representation and if it truly leads to empowerment specifically for the minority communities.
Yeah, this is like an interesting topic that kind of came across my timeline on Twitter the other day, and which kind of like inspired us to talk about this for our podcast, which is there was an individual, a sister in Islam, who decided to write an article about the Met Gala and how the lack of Muslim representation is really a travesty in that sense. Meaning, she was distressed, or she was conveying that she was distressed because of the severe lack of Muslim representation at the Met Gala, and that like raised so many questions, because is Muslim representation in these areas something beneficial? And there was a lot of interesting responses that we found in the replies to her original tweet, and then one of them is an article which if you guys want to elaborate on, so we can maybe delve into it from there.
Yeah, sure, man. So just to go back to what you were saying in regards to the original article published about the Met Gala, it was published in The Cut. It was written by Noor Tagoui. Forgive me, Noor, if I'm mispronouncing your name. But the article is titled, "Where Were the Hijabs on the Met Gala Red Carpet? This year's Met Gala theme attempted to be inclusive of all American identities except for mine." And she goes on to discuss how she was moved to tears simply because she did not see Muslim representation on the Met Gala. And going back to what Ibrahim mentioned, to what degree do we as a Muslim community really need representation on these types of stages that perhaps are not truly beneficial to us and our identity? And so we have a article written by Sister Aisha Hassan. It's published in the Qarawiyyin Project, and it's titled, "Does Representation Lead to Empowerment?" And it's a deep article discussing the history of representation of Muslims and also other minorities in America, and whether or not that's truly beneficial to us. So, Talha, I know you got some deep takes on this, man. Go ahead and take it away.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Obviously, in this podcast, we try to focus on things through the lens of the colonized mentality of Muslims, right? I think it ties in so beautifully over here, because what we see as representation is very much informed by the colonized mentality that we retain, right? So, yeah, you can think about it in a way, like I see where Sister Noor Tagoui is approaching this from, right? In terms of that, okay, we're not being represented in the Met Gala. But at the same time, this overwhelming feeling that we need to be represented in anything American, I think speaks to the fact that we don't have enough faith in ourselves as a community to establish our own means of like being represented, of our own means of representing ourselves, actually, without relying on colonizer forces. And that's just the place where my brain went to, like whenever I thought about this through the lens of like the colonized mentality of Muslims in this country.
And I think that when I know like one of our frequent guests that we have on the podcast, Seth Isa, he made a good point the other day when saying that I just kind of want to analyze like the reaction to her tweet and the thing, and also like then maybe delve into like actually the substance of the content on that. So he made a good point saying that Muslims we just kind of need to we need to find better ways to advise her, And I definitely do agree to a certain extent with that because, I mean, there was a quite. It was to be honest, it was a pretty funny, but it was a pretty funny reaction to the tweet. Like everyone was freaking out and like giving her a really hard time about it. But I think the best reply was from actually one of our previous guests that we had on the podcast, Sister Hira from season 3, and she gave a really good. She made a really good point in her reply by saying. We need to really focus on having our own identity rather than trying to like fold and conform to this identity that these kafirs basically have placed on us. Because I mean, being represented at the Met Gala is not something that is good because the Met Gala, to be quite honest, is not a place where good things happen. It's just not the best place to be as a Muslim. So it's kind of interesting how, like you said, the colonized mentality has kind of forced us to think that that's like the plane that we need to exist on.
Right. I mean, the final paragraph of the article by Aisha Hassan on the Qarawiyyin project I think sums it up pretty nicely. She says, "Finally, we need to encourage our communities and our young people in particular to not draw their strength from seeing their faces in the media or the internet. We need to harness and bolster our own strength such that confidence in our identity is not drawn from being the same as everyone else, but from being different." Right? Like we do really need to instill and I think a lot of the blame here goes back to like our community leaders, especially the first gen, who just didn't have enough foresight, like when they came here, it was to assimilate and rather than stand out. And we need to have enough confidence to stand out because we are different. We shouldn't be trying to do everything that other people here are doing, right? Ali, I think you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, of course, man. I think both of you brought in separate yet really deep points. And going back to first and foremost Ibrahim's point regarding Sister Noor's article, she's looking at it from the perspective of the fashion industry, right? And also the Met Gala, as Ibrahim pointed out. And to go slightly deeper into that topic, in general, as Muslims, do we want to be associated with things that perhaps Allah is not pleased with, just for the sake of representation, just for the sake of getting our name out there, of being known to society? And it's a certain paradigm where you either want to be loved by the people or perhaps loved by Allah, right? And I'm not trying to get deep into this, right? I'm not a scholar by any means. I don't know. Sorry. Both of you guys have more knowledge than me.
You're funny. You're really funny guy.
But when it comes down to it, when it comes to organizations and also events like the Met Gala, right? When it comes to, for example, the Golden Globes or any sort of high-stakes celebrity event, do we want to be surrounded by individuals that perhaps are not, aligning their values with ours, right? As Ibrahim pointed out, any Abrahamic faith would not necessarily agree with immodest dressing, right? So on and so forth. And so just for the sake of wanting a hijabi sister to be on the Met Gala red carpet, I don't necessarily think that we should stoop that low just for the sake of representation. That's just my 2 cents on it. And then going back to what you mentioned, we as Muslims, we derive our uniqueness and our diversity and also who we are as a form of taslim, right? As a form of submission.
Right.
And that's drastically different than what Americans expect you to be, right? We have this freedom of choice, freedom to do whatever you are. You are essentially free to do whatever you want, however you want. And within that paradigm of freedom, we have chosen to submit. And that's completely like an abstract idea. That's something that they're not familiar with. It's something that's ajib. It's crazy.
I love that you bring up submission, right? Because I feel like I remember being in a conversation recently with someone where they mentioned that they were older than me, right? One of those Am I a Zoomer? I don't know. I've always felt weird about what generation I fall in, but
You're definitely a millennial, bro.
I'm a millennial.
100%.
Okay. Well, either way, I'm a younger millennial, and I remember one of the older millennials was saying that back in his day, Islam used to mean submission, but today Islam means peace, right?
Yeah.
And Islam means peace is not really accurate.
Yeah.
Submission is more accurate, right? But to roll off of what you were saying about it being paradoxical for the majority in this country to want to submit in a land of freedom, I mean, it shouldn't be that foreign to them, right? The reason being that they do actually want us to submit, but not to God, to their culture, to assimilate within whatever they do and be represented over there as a minority within their framework rather than set up our own based on our submission to God. We should focus on that rather than submitting to the dominant culture around us, which is what representation often is. But it goes back to the whole colonized mentality, man. We need to have confidence in ourselves and create our own systems rather than just...
Yeah, exactly, man. Our morals and our values are things that we should be proud of, things that we shouldn't necessarily have to change ourselves to fit in to some other paradigm of what society should be, or how we should act, or how we should dress, or how we should look. And this kind of not only starts and ends at the Met Gala, but also it's seen, I think, as you mentioned, in politics. It's seen in the media, right? In Hollywood, for example. How many times have we seen a Netflix movie where the sister, the hijabi wearing sister, gets saved by, quote unquote, saved by a man that,
a white man,
promotes her to take off her hijab, right?
Right.
So this sort of representation that, first and foremost, is not justly doing representation to our community, and then is also twisting the narrative to fit into some other black box that it never is supposed to fit in.
I mean, you guys bring up an interesting point when you guys talk about like submission, and it makes me think of not to be too much of a dirty commie, but like in our capitalistic society, there's the reason why it's so hard for people to wrap their minds around like submitting to something, because over here you have freedom of speech, you have the freedom, which we really don't have, which is a side point. You have the freedom of you're yourself. You're an individual. So like from when we're young, they instill in us this rugged individualism that is really detrimental overall, because that's why so many people have such a hard time submitting, because they think that, I mean, at the end of the day, what is the Met Gala? It's just like a really ego boosting event. It's like you get there, if you're a celebrity, you get there, and you have four poor people who are there just to pick up your dress and walk around with you. Like, it's just boosting your own ego at the end of the day.
Yeah, you just get there and try to be the person who gets the most likes at the end of the day, the most retweets, you know?
Like, get the most attention. Like, the most attention-grabbing dress is going to be the best one.
Right.
Or, and, like, these gatherings are
not even the best one, because it's not a competition, but it's how they measure their self-worth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
We don't want people from our community. I mean, people from our community might want it, but I don't think it lines with our values for people in our community to be engaging in that, right? That's not where we derive our self-worth from.
Yeah, I mean, our self-worth comes from something greater. And like, traditionally speaking, these events they're never good for the soul, or like the soul of our community. Like, if you want more Muslim representation there, that's not a good thing. It's most definitely a bad thing, because you're just feeding into this like culture that this capitalist society has fed you since you were like a toddler, like 5 years old. Like, I mean, it's not good. We're greater than that. We can do things that are better than going to a place and exploiting people, like poor people who are like, I don't know if you guys heard, like, the whole Met Gala in and of itself is like very problematic, because there were like protesters out there, and like then you have the police like pulling up and just shutting them down and brutalizing them right outside the Met Gala. Like, how are you gonna want to support something that's very much built on oppression?
Yeah, going back to that, man. Sister Noor actually first and foremost, I want to recognize that, at least from her paradigm, her emotions are valid, right? She's,
Right.
She's visibly frustrated. She mentions that she cried, right? So this is something that first and foremost, like, our heart goes out to her as our Muslim sister, right?
Yes.
And I think you guys also touched up on this, that rather than kind of, being condescending towards her, mocking her, as we saw on some tweets, right?
Which were
We saw-
pretty funny.
I'm able to forgive that. One of our teachers, actually, he mentioned something wise. He said, when we see Muslims make mistakes, it's not just about correcting what's wrong, but helping the one who did wrong. It bordered on mockery and condescension. Sorry, my English is trash. In some areas from what was sent to him, right? And we can't necessarily expect someone to be willing to seek help and assistance if their ego is being put in check, right? And no matter who you are, if your ego gets put in check, you're going to be on the defensive, right?
No doubt.
And from her perspective, right, she lists out the co-chairs for this Met Gala, which include Billie Eilish, Naomi Osaka, right, the tennis player, right, individuals that are supposedly, as she quotes, the dream team. So she states that these are like the dream team, kind of like OJ's defense team, but sorry.
You could have also said was it the 96?
Yeah, 96.
A lot of things you could have said, man.
Yeah. But
Okay,
so
yeah,
she's
the OJ dream team. Go on.
With Alan Dershowitz.
yeah, that's true.
The Kardashians dad.
So
Not Khloe Kardashian's dad. That's O.J. Simpson.
conspiracy
yikes.
alert. So going back to that, she is looking at these individuals as leaders for diversity, right? When in reality, these individuals don't necessarily care for Muslim representation, as is clearly shown by who they invited to the Met Gala, right? So Sister Noor and those that are thinking on the same wavelength as her, you have to recognize and internalize that your help is not necessarily going to come from these individuals that don't care about you, right? It never has, whether it be throughout colonization, right? That era, going on to 200 years past that, where we now have a colonized mindset, right?
Right.
So it's necessary to first recognize and internalize that. And then secondly, Sister Noor and anyone that is thinking along the lines of her, to recognize that your hijab and your Islam and your iman is that power that will allow for you to become the best representatives of the deen, right? And through your confidence in that Islam and in that iman, you will eventually exude this nur, which is, no pun intended, which is going to uplift other people around you. And thus that representation is not going to come from the people that are oppressing you, but it's going to come from Allah, right? And then it's going to be coming through you as well, as long as Allah Azza wa Jalla is with you. So, yeah, man, that's at least my 2 cents on it. Because I noticed that one paragraph where she's, listing out these individuals that are supposedly leaders in diversity, and just because they're pop culture figures or big on social media or so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, perhaps anyone that kind of thinks along those lines, can you tell me, one time when Naomi Osaka, stood up for the people of Afghanistan, or the people of Syria, or, commented on that?
Well, I mean, even if she does, like,
Yeah.
what does that matter?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's
know?
it is essentially empty words,
It
right?
really is.
But I would state that words have power, right? No matter where it comes from, even if it's just a small sentence, right? But the fact that nothing has been said by these individuals at all, like throughout the entire list, even if it has, as Ibrahim, you mentioned, it's really just empty words. So yeah, it's kind of interesting who we look to for assistance when we should be looking for it.
With Allah.
Yeah, with Allah. So subhanAllah.
Yeah, man. I honestly, Ali, that's very profound. The points that you made, and whenever she speaks about diversity, I have no doubt that diversity is important, right? I feel very strongly about diversity, no doubt. But at the same time, you have to see what system is being diversified, right? And if a system is internally corrupt, then it doesn't matter how much diversity you throw at it. That doesn't make it a better system. It's like another example would be like the military-industrial complex within the United States, right? Different topic, but just to highlight the diversity aspect of that, it's a horrible system. Inshallah, everyone listening to this agrees with that. There's no doubt that the U.S. military is like one of the worst and like biggest terrorist organizations on the planet, in the history of the planet, right? And the solution to that is not by diversifying it. Like in recent years, we've had a big phenomenon of like the CEO of Raytheon and Boeing, one of them, I don't know which one, you know, like being a woman.
They call it like pink imperialism.
Yeah, you start putting black people and Hispanic people in like leadership positions in those companies. It doesn't matter because inherently the system itself is so flawed that throwing diversity at it does not make it a better system.
It's like that one meme, like you know what I'm talking about. Like they have like the two missiles.
Oh yeah.
One is just like plain, but the other one has like the Biden logo on it. It has like LGBTQ flag, and it's just like it has like his pronoun. Like you know, it's dumb.
Right. So you know, I use the military-industrial complex to make an analogy on it, but it's the same thing with the Met Gala. You know, if the system itself is corrupt and like morally empty, then throwing diversity at it does not make it a better system.
Yeah.
We need diversity is important, but more important is what the system itself professes in the first place, right?
Exactly.
It's looking at the symptom rather than the cause. It's like looking at a side effect of the thing rather than the main
And this
thing.
system is one that propagates indecency. You know.
Of course, yeah.
And exploitation.
Yeah.
Very, very simple.
I mean, like you just look at like any video of it, like you have like these four poor people just running around, like tending to every need of yours of like this one person who has millions of dollars in the bank, while these people while these poor people are being paid like.
It's an obscene, just you know, like show of extravagance.
It really is like Hunger Games-esque, you know, like you know, like how they have the I was watching some Twitter clips the other day, and it reminded me exactly of those like scenes in the movies where like
You know, from the Capitol.
from the Capitol, right? When they like dress up and like everyone's like looking at them and taking pictures, and it's really dystopian if you think about it. Like it's strange. I mean, like if you have to move around with the help of 4 underpaid laborers, that's it's weird.
Yeah, and what's odd about it, man, is even with the concept of representation
Right,
as Muslims, right? Sister Aisha, in her article, describes how the only representation we see from Muslim women, generally speaking, is, let's be frank, is hijabi sisters that are, to be frank, as I said, extraordinarily beautiful, right? There's
Very photogenic.
Very photogenic, right? And they are promoting, generally speaking, beauty products, right? Beauty lines. They're hijabi makeup artists.
Either
right?
that or like breaking a stereotype.
Yeah,
in
or
some
breaking
way.
a stereotype, as you stated, or they have a fashion line, right? And perhaps that's where Sister Noor is coming from, right? Because it seems as though she's very in tune with fashion, as she mentioned in her article, at least.
Yeah.
That ever since high school, she used to, you know, basically block off a time to watch the Met Gala, right? And I think a lot of our sisters in America are very familiar with, you know, fashion. This is just something that they're really big on, right? And this is their prerogative. That's cool. I respect it.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong
Right.
with, you know, wanting to look good for your spouse, and wanting to look good in general. Apologies, and wanting to, you know, perhaps utilize fashion as a means to boost your self-esteem and your confidence. There's nothing wrong with it, but I would argue that look at the fact that this is the only representation we're getting from the Muslim community. Now, what about sisters that perhaps they wear the hijab or perhaps they wear the burqa or the niqab, and they're not necessarily into that? What about representation for them? What about representation for your Muslim brothers, for example? I don't know about y'all, but I never seen a commercial with a brother that has a big beard, right, or that's wearing a kufi, or that's wearing a thobe. You know
Oh,
what
I've
I'm saying?
seen one actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. Which one is it? Mint Mobile. You know,
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Oh, man. All right,
the only reason I know about it is because it was like on every YouTube video for like a
Yeah.
long time, bro.
But nearly every commercial that or movie or form of media that includes a Muslim man is, generally speaking, a dude that, for all extensive purposes, is very whitewashed. I'm not gonna.
It's
sugarcoat
either
it, man.
whitewashed or he's a terrorist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that does justice to the other half of the Muslim demographic, the male side, right? And it's very, you know, very eye-opening for us as a community to look at how they're representing Muslims in media, right? It is a form of objectification to simply put an individual on a pedestal simply because of their beauty, right? And it's what's been done to American women that are not Muslim for the last, you know, at least in
70 years.
Yeah, 70 years for sure. So we have to be very aware and very comprehensive and holistic in how we approach representation. I know Talha mentioned specifically like the American military, right? I know Ibrahim has talked on the fashion industry through the lens of Sister Noor's article, myself as well. But also another thing that is very important is politics. And this is kind of a sphere where people get very triggered very easily. People have very heavy emotions.
No, really?
But especially with us as Muslims in America, bypassing the debate on whether or not voting is permissible or not. That's a different story. But the representation of Muslims in politics, to what degree do we allow for Muslims who are not the best suited to enter into this realm?
Well, if I may, it's not about allowing, really, right? Like this is the land of freedom.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course. Sorry.
Anybody can do what they want.
That was
as
poorly
long-
worded. Yeah,
no.
apologies.
I get the sentiment though. I think the question, like if I may rephrase your question, it's just like to what extent should we care about being involved in the political process in this country as Muslims? I guess the thing is like I would always vote for a Muslim if they were running for Congress, like within my district, right? Okay, yeah, that's something I would do. But at the same time, I don't really think we should care enough to be running for Congress in the first place.
This is actually interesting because we have Keith Ellison, right? He was a Muslim representative.
First Muslim congressman.
First Muslim congressman.
I think. I'm asking
I
you.
believe so.
I'm not sure. And then you have from the same district, you have Ilhan Omar. And then you also have Rashida, I don't know how to say her last name.
Talib. Yeah, or Talib. Yeah,
Yeah,
I apologize.
Talib.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then more recently we have a little bit a situation that we're a little bit more closely informed about was Mr. For Congress. Mr. Junaid for Congress.
Yeah, Junaid Ahmed,
Yeah.
who's running.
I didn't know that was his last name.
You thought his name was Junaid for Congress.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've been referring to him as.
Okay, yeah, Junaid Ahmed, who's running for Illinois' 8th Congressional District in 2022.
Yeah, and I think
If you live there, vote for him.
Yeah. and here's the thing, right?
I'm doing my civic duty, guys.
Yeah, no worries.
Like I genuinely think that I 100% agree with your point. Like there's nothing that backs this. Like it's not real. Like countries shouldn't exist. Like why? If I go to the border of U.S. and Canada, why do I need a passport to step 1 foot over the line? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like first of all, the United States government has done horrendous things, like to the indigenous populations of this country, and
to the black populations that the stolen brought here.
and to the immigrant populations. Everybody, they just done horrendous crimes. But if people want to run for Congress, like we mentioned earlier, I think it's all right. Just do it. But I don't think we should place that high of an expectation or that high of standards on them. Like if Ilhan Omar goes to a gay pride parade, it's just whatever. Like don't take it that seriously. Like I'd rather have.
Well, let's clip that real quick, bro.
No.
We're about to get some reputation views on this boy.
I'm being serious though. Like, why are we placing such a high expectation on her? She's not first a Muslim and then a congresswoman. She's not like she's first a congresswoman who's looking, because you have to conform a little bit to be in politics, because politics is a dirty game to begin with. That's the first thing. The second thing is, why are we placing such high expectations on her to begin with? Like, why is that?
She's Muslim.
Well,
What you mean, boy?
she's in politics.
What? No.
No, like why are we as a Muslim community putting?
Why should we not?
such
Why should we not?
No. Why are we?
No,
That's the better
because
question.
because we should not value Congress that greatly. Like, okay, so you got elected to Congress. It's that's exactly the point of this episode, right?
Yeah.
Like it ties into everything that we've been talking about in terms of what representation should actually matter to us. To answer your question very frankly.
So you
right?
would agree? Sorry, you would agree that we. So sorry to go back to your original point. You're stating that Congress in general, or according to your words, the American government is not necessarily legitimate in the first place. So why should we necessarily care about who runs?
It's
Congress,
just,
right?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. It's,
Okay.
That's one point, and
Yeah.
the other point is that too. Even if you view it as legitimate, and even if you view Congress as making some sort of difference, you still have to overcome the hurdles that are inherently built in the electoral system. Right? You have gerrymandering, you have lobbying, you have all these different problems that make it so hard to have change in the first place. But on the off chance that maybe a little bit, there's a small percentage of a fraction of a chance that she may make a small difference in some way for some person that's being exploited right now, I really don't mind throwing my support behind her, or critically supporting her, which is a really good point that we need to discuss a little bit. Maybe in a future episode, because that's like a
talk
really
about critical support.
because that's like
Yeah.
a really big topic that we need to get into.
And it's misunderstood for sure.
Yeah, like it's okay. Like it's all right. Maybe Muslims' lives will get better if she's in Congress.
in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's like that, I really don't mind supporting her, or like even like whatever, like
Even
critically
campaigning? I'm sorry, I catch
No.
that last part.
Canvassing, phone
Yeah.
banking.
So I mean, this is just my 2 cents. Obviously, you guys are entitled to your own opinion, which is I think it's valid. While I understand your point that perhaps we shouldn't necessarily care who's in Congress, at the same time there is this understanding for young Muslims, for people that live in America in general, the Muslim community in general, that these people have been put on a pedestal, right? And they quote unquote represent the Muslim community, right? Whether or not that's valid is a different discussion. right?
Absolutely.
And obviously, I don't necessarily believe that everyone that's put in a position or a platform adequately represents the Ummah in America, right? But given the fact that Allah has put her in this position, right? Is it okay for us to have individuals, and different shuyukh have obviously different levels of emotions towards this, right?
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to clarify. I'm not coming at this from an Islamic point of view.
No, I
whatsoever.
understand. Yeah.
Like there's no like religious backing to
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
say. Like,
of course.
yeah.
So, I think the issue with many Muslims today is, okay, how do we necessarily support? And obviously, Ibrahim, you might say, oh, well, you critically support her. Okay, to what degree do we support an individual that is pro LGBTQ values, right? And then also, for example, how do we support an individual that claims, that has stated openly that my Allah, that is a she, right? That's obviously an aqidah issue, right? Just generally speaking, right?
Well, it's-
I mean, it's an aqidah issue, but then if you support a Christian congressman, he also thinks that God has a son. Like,
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, this is we're looking at it from the sake of Muslim representation in America, right? Or there's just so many different issues that I think it is valid to at least have the discussion that, hey, because we're stuck in this paradigm that that these individuals are put on a platform and that we believe somehow inherently that they represent the Ummah in America.
which they shouldn't.
Which they shouldn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
they shouldn't, right? We shouldn't necessarily place our level of Islam in America on personalities,
Yes,
right? And I think we, at least here today, agree on that.
We actually spoke about this in our last episode.
Yeah.
About the face report and how we need to be placing more certainty in actually Islamic qualifications rather than personalities.
Yeah, and I think just not to get too roundabout on the topic, it comes down to rather a lack of knowledge, right? I think subhanAllah, like all throughout our seasons, I've noticed that many of the issues are just so deep rooted on a lack of basic knowledge, right? Of first and foremost who Allah is, right, and then also understanding the Quran on not even like a deep level, right? I'm not telling people like go deep into ulum of the Quran and go hard on it, but like just a slightly superficial level of understanding of religion would clarify so many of these issues, right? So many socio-political issues, right? So it would open our minds and open our quote unquote third eye to the atrocities that we're seeing today, right? But yeah, man, I think it's a deep topic in politics for sure, and also the military complex, as you mentioned, Talha, and also in fashion, and representation in general, man, is it's a deep topic for Muslims.
That's definitely a good point that you bring up, mashallah. Like, I mean, just to kind of circle back like a tiny bit like to the politics side. One thing that I wanted to mention as well is like, would you rather actually have someone who's a Muslim but supports these things, or would you rather have a warmongering right wing person who's also a Christian who wants to like quote unquote, these guys have said, carpet bomb the Middle East. Like I'd rather support someone who doesn't want to openly murder my brothers and sisters overseas. You know,
Yeah.
that's just how I feel. Like if I can just vote for that, with my intention being for preventing that to happen.
So it's like a lesser of the two evils dichotomy, I guess, right?
That too, but also like within the Islamic fiqh framework of like istihsan, right? So you do something that brings more benefit about than something that doesn't. But it all goes back to the topic of this episode, representation, right? Like, okay, yeah, we can have someone in Congress with weird aqidah beliefs who is over there to vote on legislation that might increase, that might decrease, the United States military funding to Israel. Okay, whatever. That person doesn't need to have perfect aqidah. But also, as a community, then we should not derive our self-worth from that person being elected to Congress in the first place. That should not be a role model for us. Like, that person can be there doing what they're doing. But we need to have our own systems from which we actually do derive our self-worth and from which find value within ourselves, right?
Nurture
It's
growth,
the exact same thing as the Met Gala. See, here's the thing. Like, even if a hijabi sister ended up being invited to the Met Gala and going over there, I don't care enough to be out in the streets or even on Twitter saying that what she's doing is wrong. But I do think that the more important conversation is the broader one, which is that why would this impact us whatsoever? If a hijabi sister is or isn't at the Met Gala, that shouldn't impact us because that's not where we should be pulling our confidence from, right? And it's a weird organization of our priorities and also very reflective of our colonized mentality that we value these institutions over ones that are our own.
Yeah,
right?
So I guess...
Look, let's talk about something that American Muslims are underrepresented in.
Yeah.
Our Umrah quotas. The Saudi government gives American Muslims a certain quota of like Umrah visas every year. And we never meet that because we don't care enough to go
SubhanAllah, I didn't know
to
that.
visit the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, every other country, well, most Muslim majority countries, you know, they have met their quota for decades now. People in Indonesia and Pakistan are on wait lists for like a decade.
Yeah, SubhanAllah.
You know, before they get a chance to go and do Umrah, they get their visa and they get to go. But American Muslims, we get to go every year right away, like whenever we want, because we never meet the quota that we have based on our population, because not enough American Muslims care to go. So why do we undervalue this representation at the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at his greatest house, the one that Ibrahim alayhi salam, built when no one else on earth worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time, and instead value our representation at the Met Gala and at Congress higher than this, you know?
Yeah, man,
That's a really good
deep
point.
I guess the next step or kind of a pivot would be what, at least from y'all's experience and from y'all's knowledge, what would be like the practical applications to possibly as a community open ourselves up to recognizing the lack of importance of representation in certain fields, right?
Well,
Or, and I wouldn't necessarily say the lack of representation. That was a poor choice of words, but how do we...
I don't think it's a poor choice of words, right?
Yeah.
It is a lack of representation, but we also need to prioritize where we want representation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
That's
with that
better.
in mind, a lack of representation. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting thing because where we want representation in our culture is not really in the best areas, like we discussed, right? So I think first and foremost, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, right? We're better than the Met Gala, you know.
Yeah.
To kind of validate and acknowledge Sister Noor's point about like the whole fashion industry, right? I think it's interesting, you know. I think Muslims should have more of a role in the fashion industry as a whole. I think that if we can use like we've talked about these ideas before, right? If Muslims can have influence in high fashion, right, and use Islamic clothing and Islamic modesty and principles of Islamic modesty, and implementing innovative fashion ideas, I think it's a great thing. But necessarily, but not necessarily being included in the Met Gala. So that being said, I think that we definitely need to focus on coming up with our own forms of representation, right? That align with our morals and values, whether that be in media, entertainment, news, fashion, anything really. We just need to do better in terms of those things, and I don't really know how to tie this back to the colonized mentality, but it speaks more to like the capitalist system that we live in, because we've become such worker bees in terms of the fact that the only thing that we do is when we go to school, we either study to, for the majority of immigrants, is we either study to become engineers, doctors, or lawyers. Like that's the most common stereotype that we always hear because it's true. And so what happens is these different things that are necessary in our Muslim community in the United States are severely neglected, right? We don't have people that are going into fashion, even if they like it. We don't have people that are going into media and entertainment and this and that. That creates a vacuum. And that creates situations where, like, look, we're underrepresented at the Met Gala. Why do we want to be there in the first place? We need to really, first and foremost, stop becoming engineers and doctors and lawyers. And this is coming from someone who's guilty of doing it himself.
Yeah, all three of us.
Like literally, we're two engineering majors and a doctor sitting in a room talking about how engineering majors and being doctors is not productive for our society. Like, I understand that. Like, we just need to do better, man.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, Adi, I can think of it in two ways. One is knowledge, like you've emphasized and like we've emphasized before, which is knowledge of Islam, right? What God wants from us, and what expectations we should have for ourselves based on what we know of this life and the next, right? That always helps to increase our own knowledge and to help others with increasing their knowledge, but also knowledge of the capitalist system that we live in, right? We can't be complacent within the system with the role that we've been given by our benevolent colonizers. Yeah, like they've told us to, okay, you model minority, Pakistani Americans or Indian Americans or other Muslim majority country Americans, you come to our country and you work in Silicon Valley or the medical field, and that's about it, right? Yeah. We need to have knowledge of the system and of the history of this system in order to be able to break away from it. And another aspect through which I can think of, like when you say real immediate solutions, is unity. If Muslims have come together and put something together, like started creating our own systems, and all our systems in this country are in their infancy right now for obvious reasons. Yeah. The best thing that we can do is support it without being too negative about it, cynical about it, right? Whenever Muslims create an institution like Zaytuna College, we should see it as a positive thing and encourage more of that to come about. Let's say Muslim fashion designers in this country come together and create their own platform where they can uplift people from our religion and encourage them to work in the fashion industry under obviously Islamic values, right, of modesty and wearing clothes that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we should absolutely encourage it and uplift it in whatever way we can. We need to be united as a community. I think these two things are the ways that we can think it, and I hope that's answered your question. But I'd also like to hear from you. What do you think we can do?
No, I think you guys touched on some really great points. First and foremost, having the knowledge of what Allah is pleased with and what He is displeased with. And if you have that knowledge, then you'll be successful in this dunya no matter what trials and tribulations come your way. And then also supporting those ventures and institutions that have already been established by the Muslims in our community that are looking to do good, right? And I know individuals, for some odd reason, they nitpick certain faults and certain mistakes that certain institutions have made, right? And because of that, they're like, oh, I'm never going to support it, right? Oh, I can't support this, they're doing this. And it's like, bro, then if you're not going to support it, then what better alternative do you have to it?
Right.
Right. If you're just going to sit there and critique, and that's not the way the Muslim, we are proactive, right? We put in the work. in Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay, right? If you're going to do something, you got to go 100% into it. You got to have ihsan in it. You got to,
Yep.
if you're going to critique something, man, you better be doing something better than it. You better be putting in the work. And if you want to see change, especially in America, if you want to see change, then as you said, Talha, you got to know the history of America, know the history of whatever field you're going into in order to drastically change that for the better.
No doubt.
So it comes with knowledge, beneficial knowledge, right? Righteous action, and then consistency and dedication, right? So it's a solid potion that if we, no sihr here, but like, if we put it together and we actually have the vision and the determination to do it, wallahi, things can change. Things can change as long as Allah wills it to occur. And that's something that, as a Muslim community, we need to collectively come together and say, yo, we're not liking things here. We see the faults and the cracks in the society, and we're here to smooth them out and to rectify them.
And the thing is, I mean, all these cracks in our society, we have the solution for them within Islam. We just need to believe in ourselves and bring that to the forefront, right?
So for example, a sister like Sister Noor, and many sisters that do think like her, right? My 2 cents, and obviously you can go ahead and take it in the trash, or you can take it to heart. It's it's your decision. Would be learn what Allah Azza wa Jalla has permitted for you to express yourself with, right? And go from there. And as long as you're doing something that Allah is pleased with, then you're for sure going to be successful.
And it's going to bring benefit to those around you.
And it's going to bring benefit to those around you, and it's going to bring barakah into your life, and so on and so on. The benefits are innumerable, right? As long as you're doing something that you have yaqeen that Allah is going to be pleased with, right? Whether it's in the fashion industry, whether it's in media, whether it's in news, so on and so forth, right? And you can change the paradigm of whatever industry you go into with that mentality, right? And it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but with the consistency and the determination, like we mentioned previously, things can happen, right? And first and foremost, with Allah's aid. So, yeah, man, that's really my 2 cents on it. Only because you asked that that I would advise people to take seriously, because too often we're trapped in the colonized mentality and in the mindset of appealing to those in higher power, right? Appealing to those people that don't necessarily care about us in the first place. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Fourth Podcast, brought to you by Morisco. If you haven't already, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter, and have a great rest of your day. Okay.